Talk Shoes.
Recorded live.
Hello, everybody. It is Saturday, October 1st, Yahoo, 2016. And we are here tonight with author, Mr. Monty Montgomery, who also goes by the pen name Augustus Blackstone. Monty is the writer of several books, the most notable of which is called The Errant Sovereign's Handbook. A real easy way to get out of jury duty is to print off that book, show up for jury duty with that as your reading material, check in at the office and say, yes, I'm here, I'm ready to get going, while having that book in front of you. And they might see that and go, oh, you're one of those. You're dismissed. So, Monty, how you doing?
Well, opinions vary, but I think I'm doing fine.
Opinions vary. Hey, do me a favor. Hit star 8 on your phone real quick.
Me?
Yeah.
All right.
Put you at the top of my little queue so I don't accidentally mute you. So, anyway, do you have anything specific that you want us to talk about tonight? I think something about contracts. Creating contracts with public servants, especially those that get in your face.
Yeah, practically everything operates on contract. And it's one area that the corporations can't really screw around with too much because it endangers their own existence if they do. So, as I think I mentioned earlier, a week or two ago, there's nothing wrong with admiralty. There's nothing wrong with commercial law. There's nothing really wrong with the UCC as long as you understand what you're dealing with. If you go into a court operating under operating under the statutes and try to use constitutional law, it isn't going to work. It's like trying to play football on a basketball court under basketball rules. It doesn't work too well. Anyway, I'm assuming that...
One candidate. Don't lie about how she...
Okay, go ahead.
What was that?
We're getting some background noise from a caller.
Oh. Okay. One of the ways I like to illustrate how that works is the contract and agreement. I sent you a copy of the form. Actually, I sent you two of them.
Okay.
And I don't know how many of the listeners have actually had a chance to look at them. As I mentioned to you before, what I prefer to use is the one-page contract on anybody and everybody, judges, cops, it doesn't matter. But the second one, the two-pager, that was actually used in an Oregon case successfully. But it's really difficult for a lot of people to understand what's actually being said in it. And, it's the same old thing. You can't be going into these courts or playing this game unless you know what you're doing to some extent, because it's like you can't sing the tune if you don't know the words. And people, these judges and whatnot, they will test you to see if you really know what you're talking about. So I like to write things simply in simple language that still meets the legal requirements for sufficiency. But I like to write it in plain, ordinary language so that the average person, or even, and especially a jury, would understand what's being said. I don't get into words of art and specialized nomenclature and that sort of thing. That just makes it worse, and it tends to alienate people when you do that. So, having said that, what I'd like to do is if somebody has a question about those, if they've actually seen this document, and then we can take it from there.
I'm not sure that anybody has.
Okay. Well, what this does on the short one, contract and agreement to faithfully perform certain obligatory fiduciary duties to the benefit of the sovereignty. Now, we're supposed to be the sovereignty, and the courts have said that. Sovereignty is vested in the people. It's know all men by these precedents that I, then a blank line. And that's where for example, a traffic cop would put their name. And if they were to say something, or you can fill it in for them, if they agree to contract with you. And the reason you're asking them to contract with you is because if they've even taken a proper Article 6 oath, they haven't taken the correct one, or they've given their oath to a corporation and not to you. In other words, the oath creates an obligation, and the question is, to whom is that obligation owed? To a corporate fiction or to the people? And the purpose of the oath, the Article 6 oath, is to impose personal liability. Now, there's lots of arguments to the contrary, but what other purpose would it have than accountability, personal accountability, which is also a protection for the organization called the government. So, moving on with this, acting in the official capacity of. Now that's, I didn't finish that one part. So if they say, well, if they give you as their name Officer Jones, you can come back and say, is that the name on your birth certificate? And then and you can use that on virtually anyone. I'm just using traffic cops because it's a scenario that most people are familiar with, so they can relate to it. And it goes on after the comma, acting in the official capacity of. Now, that's where they'll say officer so-and-so, or trooper so-and-so, or judge or magistrate so-and-so. What that does is it makes it clear that they're acting in a capacity of a agent or representative of somebody else or something else. What that does is it creates an avenue of liability on their employer, such as the all-cap state of Oregon or whatever. They're acting and it says that on the document, in the official capacity of, and then they'll say judge, officer, police officer, whatever, on behalf of, and then that's where you put in who they're representing, state, county, whatever. Then in consideration, because a contract has to have consideration, in consideration of full investigative cooperation and disclosure, certain private personal information requested by me, this is the officer or whoever's going to sign this, from, and then your name would go in there, but you don't put your name on it until you have their information on the document. Their information and their signature. Then you fill in your name, and then you would sign it and date it. And you describe yourself as a sovereign beneficiary to the solemn oath affirmation by which I am required to be bound under Article 6 of the Supreme Law of the land. Well, in most cases, they're not actually bound by it, so that's why you're binding them with this contract. It goes back to what I said. If they don't have the authority through the contract or through the Constitution, they have to get it from you through contract. Now, most of their contracts are not called that. They're called agreements, simply because there is no lawful money in circulation, so there is no consideration. Without consideration, there is no contract. This is what they're committing to. Do hereby contractually promise upon said oath affirmation not to violate or infringe any of the rights secured to said sovereign beneficiary by Articles 4 and 5 of Amendment 1st to said Supreme Law of the land. And I have AD 1791. The Constitution itself did not become operative until 1791. It was adopted in 89, but it did not become operative until the states ratified it. The states at that time would not ratify it until the Bill of Rights had been added. That process was not completed until 1791. And you'll notice, if any historian will notice that most of the powers of Congress, such as establishing a postal service or a system, coining money and that sort of thing, most of those acts were not enacted until 1792, until after the Constitution became operative. And I further promise that no private personal information so disclosed to me will be in any way be used at any time hereafter to the detriment of said sovereign beneficiary without express consent. What you're doing here is you're reversing all the presumptions. And I hereby further stipulate my permission to said sovereign beneficiary to file suit against me for damages in any court of competent jurisdiction in the event I break faith and or breach either of the aforesaid promises. So they're giving you permission to sue them if they violated your rights. In the case of a traffic cop, they already have.
Right.
Now, what really puts a lot of oomph in this, because it's consistent with the UCC, it's consistent with commercial law, it's consistent with how the courts operate, is if you do the exercise on the schedule of fees and charges. In other words, get it published so that it's a public notice, and then send off copies of the public notice to the governor and the heads of the state police and the county commissioners and whoever else you want to send it to, so they now have personal knowledge of it. And that puts the teeth in this contract as far as remedy or collection. And believe me, if your position is with the schedule of fees and charges, what you're basically saying is, okay, if you want to violate or deprive me of my property or of my rights, it's perfectly fine with me, but this is what the fee is. This is what it's going to cost you. And $1,000 a minute adds up pretty fast. Okay? And it starts the moment the deprivation occurs. You can't do this after the fact. You can't go ex post facto on it. So, going back to the contract, it has to be voluntary. Now, to illustrate this, I'll actually get into a few of my war stories here to illustrate how this works. And again, I'm going to use traffic as the example because most people can relate to that. Now, what I want to also stress here is like on traffic situations. First of all, you have to remember that these police officers typically have to deal with things that we don't want to deal with every day. And these cops are, you have to remember, these cops are people too. They have all of the strengths and weaknesses and faults and virtues that anyone else might have. And they got to put up with that crap and be polite about it every day, when sometimes what they're dealing with needs a good swift kick in the ass and an admonishment to grow up. They can't do that. So if you can put yourself in that position, then you can better understand what you're dealing with. And the other thing is to remember, if you can take the seriousness out of it. In other words, what I like to do, and the examples I'm going to give you are pretty much all things that I have actually done in the past. I've led a very full and entertaining and active life. I've got a few scars to show for it, but nevertheless. So, for example, if you get pulled over and a cop asks you, do you know why I pulled you over? You could say, the one thing you don't want to do is go stone silent or act furtive or nervous, that sort of thing. That suggests to them you're doing something wrong, just as it would with you when someone's acting that way with you. So if you can come across playfully, they say, do you know why I pulled you over? You can say, well, let's see. It can't be sexual attraction or animal magnetism. Do I win a prize if I guess correctly?
Huh.
Okay.
Side note, do you know why they asked that question?
Of course I do, but I don't want them, I don't want to go there. In other words, I want to control this conversation.
Why do they ask the question?
They want a confession.
Basically, I have a friend who used to be
they want a confession, or they want a confession or an admission out of you.
I have a friend who is a former police officer, and he used to ask that question, and his answer was, he asked the question so you don't have to go to court. Meaning that if you confess to it, then he doesn't have to go to court to defend his citation. There it is. He confessed.
Well, okay. But it still amounts to the same thing. He's asking for a confession or an admission.
Right.
So if you come back and say something like I just suggested, and I've actually done that before, it makes them stop and think, because you're not being demeaning, you're being playful. And you're inviting him or her. And by the way, when I say a man or men, it's not gender specific. If I'm going to be gender specific, I will indicate that. Because there's plenty of female police officers out there too. Or let's say if the cop simply says, I want to see your driver's license, a way you could come back on that, I haven't actually used this one, but I have considered it. You could say that, when they say, I want to see your driver's license, you come back and say, that would be indecent exposure. Are you trying to solicit me? Now, if you get somebody that's willing to play with you, play the game with you, and there's a few that will, they could say, well, how is it indecent exposure? And you could say something like, well, every morning when I get up and look in the mirror, I scare the hell out of myself, and I just didn't want to inflict it on someone else. And then another one that's very popular is that the traffic officer said, a cop says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I mean, you could say, well, I'll have to ask my onboard computer cruise control. But if you really want to be entertaining, or make it entertaining, you could say, "I'm trying to reach a public toilet before I crap my pants. Can you help me out with that?" That could go anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, another true life story was I was traveling with a friend of mine in his pickup on the passenger side of the vehicle. He was pulled over, but he was pulled over because I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. So when this is a state trooper, fairly young one, he came up on my side of the vehicle, and he said, "I want to see a driver's license." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm not driving." And he kind of gave me a pained look, and he said, "I want to see some ID." And I said, "Do you mean you want to know who I am?" He said, "Yes." So I gave him my name. And I'm very overt with what I do with these people. Because, as I said, I intend to control the conversation. So I gave him my name, and he says, "Where do you reside?" And I said, "Do you mean where do I live?" He said, "Yes." And I said, so I gave him an address. And we did some other things that I'm not going to get into right now. But anyway, I was setting him up is what I was doing.
Okay.
And then he moves around to the other side of the vehicle. By this time, there's 3 or 4 other patrol cars, state trooper patrol cars, parked at a distance from us, all around us. And he had another one parked behind him. He was immediately behind us. So he came up on the operator's side and asked to see a driver's license, and he went through the routine with him. And I leaned down and looked at him, and I said, "Is that firearm you're wearing loaded?" He looked back at me, and he said, "Yes, it is." He kind of smirked or gave a little smile and said, "Yes, it is." So I came right back at him, and I said, "Are you going to shoot us with it?" And he had to pause for a couple of seconds. Like I said, this guy was young. He had to pause for a couple of seconds, and he came back and he said, "Only if provoked." So I came right back at him, and I said, "What do I have to do to provoke you?"
Oh.
And what I was doing here was not only playing with him and hoping he would play back. He did a little bit. But to also establish, I knew they were recording this whole thing through his mic that they wear on their lapel.
Uh-huh.
And that goes through their patrol car, and that you can get a recording of all these stops and incidences from the state police or whoever their agency is. It's usually on CD. At any rate, which I did do in this case, I said, "What do I have to do to provoke, or what do we have to do to provoke you?" And I don't quite remember what his response was. It was a bit vague, probably because he wasn't real certain. And then I followed up and I said, "What do we get to do if you provoke us?"
Ooh.
And at that point, I looked in the mirror. We had Western-style mirrors on the pickup, and I'm not sure how long during this conversation, but I had another officer standing slightly behind my door next to the rig with his hand on his weapon. Which, that doesn't bother me. It might bother some people, but it doesn't bother me. Now
Okay.
Now this whole thing was to set up the dialogue to invalidate any contract. In that particular instance, I was cited for not wearing a seatbelt, and I should also mention that both of us, myself and the operator, were fairly well known by the local constabulary.
Huh.
And when they handed the citation to me for signature, it had a clear plastic cover, so the only thing you could write on the citation was right on the signature line. Couldn't exit out or put in qualifiers or make any changes. So in very small print, tiny print, I put the by et armis, and then I went ahead and signed it because I'd already set these guys up, so I didn't really care. Anyway, as far as signing a citation, one thing you could do is, and I would be perfectly willing to do so, I've never had the opportunity, other than the one I just mentioned. You could come, they want you to sign the contract, say, you could say something like, are you going to shoot me or beat the crap out of me if I don't sign your contract? Now, they're most likely going to come back and say it's not a contract. I've had that happen before with federal agents. And then the immediate response is, if it's not a contract, why do you need my dated signature on it to make it operative? Now, at that point, you may receive a threat of arrest for obstruction. Okay? That's fairly standard. You say obstruction of what? It's not a crime to ask questions, by the way. Obstruction of what? They're going to come back and say obstructing the police officer in the performance of his duty, or something similar to that. Then you come back with the next question. What is the duty you're supposed to be performing, and to whom do you owe that duty? Again, you're setting them up. That's all revolves around contract law. So I'm going to end up on the war stories. I don't like doing war stories unless they illustrate something. I think we've just done that.
Okay.
So if there's no questions at this point, I can move on to the affidavit that's used in conjunction with the schedule of fees and charges. Anybody have questions yet?
If you have any questions, hit star 8 on your phone. Star 8. Hit star 8. Okay. We got somebody in Orange County. Your phone unmutes.
Hi there.
Your turn. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to know, how do you sign that ticket?
I qualify the signature. I do that with every, as I mentioned, I think last week, your signature, well, first of all, I have to go earlier than that. These corporations impersonating government, that's what we're dealing with today. They don't have the authority through the Constitution. So they have to get it from you by contract. You're the only one who can give them that authority. And the evidence of that is your signature. The signature does two things. It either authenticates, like when you sign an affidavit, it authenticates it as the truth, or it authorizes. It has no other purpose. And the authorization is for them to do something that the Constitution does not allow them to do. Does that make sense?
Okay, but so do you not sign?
Okay, so no. I mean, you're going to have to sign certain things to live. You know, I don't have any problem with opening bank accounts or things like that. I won't admit to being a U.S. citizen because I'm not. That would be perjury. The U.S. citizen is a taxpayer. It comes from the old Roman civil law. And it also, you waive your Bill of Rights and submit yourself to majority rule, which expresses itself through the legislature, and that makes you subject to the statutes. Okay? So that's what I won't do. Now, as far as other things, just day-to-day life, I don't mind putting my signature on certain kinds of contractual instruments, but I will qualify my signature, or I will restrict it. And as I think I mentioned last week, the one restriction I typically like to use the most is non-assumpsit per idem senans persona ficta. That's a Latin phrase. What it if you have access to these documents through TAD, it's on the documents, so you don't have to worry about how to spell it. What it means in English, translates that phrase is, I assume no liability by or through any fictitious entity that has a name that sounds the same as mine when spoken.
Oh, that's good.
Okay? And what you've done is you just thrown their whole name game with the all capital letter name out the window.
How do you fit that on that little ticket?
Yeah.
Yeah, like signing
you
a
have a
DMV for a license, there's no room.
Well, we've had rubber stamps made with real small print. You print it on there. It's a bit difficult to write out by longhand.
Aren't these electronic things they give you now, though, to sign?
Is there a signature on the electronic ticket?
Well, they hand you their box, and it's electronic, and they give you that stylus pen. And, I mean, there's no room. You might be able to fit all rights reserved or under duress or UCC 1308, but I don't see how you have room for all that unless it could be abbreviated.
Well, that's why you have to ask the cop what he's going to do to you if you don't sign the contract. If they threaten you,
let's say he's going to arrest you, and it's just not a good day for you to get arrested.
No. They have to warn you. They can't just arrest you. They have to say, if you don't sign it, I'll arrest you. That's a warning.
Right. Duress.
That is also coercion. In any contract,
I see. You're getting it on the record.
Contract, any signature obtained under that's coerced voids the contract.
I see. So it's important to get it on the record if they're recording or you're recording to ask what's going to happen if I don't and get them to admit that first. I can almost guarantee you they're going to be recording it. Typically, it's through the mic that they have clipped to their lapel on their uniform. And that transmits through their patrol car, and it is recorded. They do that for liability reasons. So all you have to do is ask him, what are you going to do to me? And if he says, I can arrest you, he said, I didn't ask you what you can do. I said, I asked you, what are you going to do if I don't sign this contract? That's where they will probably say, well, then I would arrest you or I will arrest you or whatever. Now you've got the threat. Now you've got the coercion, and it voids the contract, and you can deal with it later. And that's where the affidavit comes in, because there's no law that can compel you to waive your rights. There's no law that can compel you to sign an unconscionable contract.
Okay, good. Now, do you recommend traveling with some traveling papers with you to hand them?
Well, you have to understand that you don't need a license to travel. That's a right.
I've got that down. Do you carry papers with you?
But if you're going to use the highways for commercial purposes, then you need a license to do that. But you have the authority to issue your own license. I've issued myself a license. I've given myself permission to use the highways for commercial purposes. Signed it and dated it, and the date, I just put a series of numbers. I don't put dashes or slashes between them. And when that's come up before, they say, well, where's the number on this license? I said, it's right there. It also happens to be my birthday.
Do you get the
how many other licenses
notarized or authenticated?
Well, I mean, you can rig it up so you got a picture on it if you want. Actually, if you read Volume 2 of the Aaron Sovereign's Handbook, I suggest a method of creating your own identification that they have to recognize because it has a notary seal on it.
Ah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is that. In other words, you can do what they do. There's no law that compels you to use their forms.
Okay, that makes sense.
As long as you supply the information requested or required, you don't have to use their form to do that. And you can put as many qualifiers on your form as you choose to do so.
But then you're handing them your address, your name, your birth date, or do you redact a lot of that?
Why would you care? In other words, your position is if you have a valid claim against me, the living woman, then you will address me as a living woman. You will not come at me through this artificially created fiction, which I have no memory. There's actually a statement that goes with that. That's in the affidavit. Let's see. Where did I put it? Okay. The word memory has significance when you're dealing with courts or when you're dealing with corporations, and basically when you're dealing with fictions, because that's the only memory a fiction has, are its records. So it's highly significant when you use that word. The statement here is, I have no memory of accepting any legal duty or obligation in relation to any fictitious entity or person which has a name that sounds the same as mine when spoken, or which is styled in all capital letters, including but not limited to accepting service of process for or making legal representations on behalf of any such fictitious entity. Okay?
Okay.
And then you can also add in that I have no memory of waiving any legal duty or obligation owing to me by virtue of mandatory solemn oath, pledge, bond, surety, or otherwise. That's in reference to the Article 6 oath, keeping you secure in your person and property. So, as long as you consistently maintain that legal posture, there's not a lot they can do about it. And I would really recommend that, if you haven't gotten it already, through TAD, get the affidavit. This was actually, I sanitized it. It was actually written for a woman on a traffic matter in Idaho. But it's very instructive. That's one of the other attributes of the way I write legal documents, is it's not only easy to understand, it's also educational.
Let me state real quick how you can get it. It's that document is in the members section of the website. So for those of you that are already part of the monthly membership, you can go log in and download it from the document section. You'll have to go to the index page for all. When you log in, there's several mentors, but at the bottom of the page it says all mentors index or something like that. You click on that, or there's one that says all documents index. You click on that, and then you'll see Monty's name. You click on it. Right now, we only have 2 documents at this time, which are the documents that he is speaking of.
Now, is this an affidavit that you carry with you when you're traveling, or is this one after the fact to take to court after a ticket, let's say?
No, it's after the fact. I don't encourage people to get into arguments with traffic cops and that sort of thing.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
what you do is you set it up with them, but you don't get into an argument at that point. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the cop any good.
Okay.
But you can set them up so that when you go to court, you can go in and kick butt. Now, I might mention here, too, that one of the most reliable ways to get a case dismissed almost instantly, there's 16 states that have a constitutional provision similar to the Constitution for the state of Washington. In that particular Constitution, it's Article 4, Section 27. This is a constitutional requirement. And the direct quote is, "The style of all process shall be," and it's quoted, "the state of Washington title case," not all caps. And the corporation, state of Washington, all caps, hasn't been given the authority to do that.
Wow.
So the style of all process shall be, quote, "the state of Washington title case," unquote, "and all prosecutions shall be conducted in its name and by its authority." So they can't comply with that. And I know a lot of people in Washington who have gotten cases dismissed on that argument alone.
Because the case is brought in the all caps name on the court papers, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's awesome.
So, and please don't ask me what the other 16 states are. I don't recall. You'll have to check your own state constitution. I know Oregon is not one of them.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Is California?
Check and see. It's
Same
possible.
article?
It's possible because California is kind of interesting. It's in their state flag. It says it right on the flag that it's a republic.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting things in the California Constitution. It may have that provision. I don't know, but that's one way of doing it.
It would be a different article number, correct?
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Now, one of the reasons the courts dismiss on that basis, and others similar, is because, and I mentioned this before, that the Supreme Court has said that the courts are not empowered to take cognizance of political issues or quarrels or controversies. They're not empowered to do that. And what that's in reference to, what they're using as the basis for that opinion is the separation of powers. And I believe just about every state in the Union has that requirement in their Constitution that they have to separate the powers, which is another approach to killing these things. Probably
I have also heard in a case where it's United States versus, let's say you, since the United States is bankrupt, they have no standing to sue. I've also heard other papers brought in United States name versus someone that they then change in the body of their lawsuit against you to United States of America and mention a whole different corporation, and to watch for those things.
Right. Again, you're talking about the attack or aggressor side of this thing. What I typically have done the most of for people is to show them the defensive posture. In other words, I've asked people, what do you want from this? What do you want out of this? If you want to go out and sue the government or whatever, go to law school. But most of them have come back and said, I just want them to leave me alone. So that's how I design this stuff. You are too dangerous to handle when you do things certain ways. They will leave you alone.
That's good.
Okay? And, that way you can just get on with life. I don't want to spend, I've never wanted to spend my life litigating, and I've ended up doing that. I'm a miner. I want to go out and mine. But instead I'm doing this. So I know I'm too old to do a lot of the things I would like to do. So
we have somebody else that has a question, by the way.
Okay. Have I answered your question?
Very well, thank you. I like the easy road and just being able to defend and know what to say, to have them leave me alone, especially when traveling.
Well, nobody likes a fight, but that at the same time, nobody wants to be a victim or a slave either.
Right.
So, anyway.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Washington State, when your phone unmutes, it's your turn.
Hello.
Hey, Don, what's going on?
Yeah, hi, this is Don. Now, this is my first time on the call. I have a technical question. I tried to look you up on the internet to talk to you and couldn't, come into your call. Are you also on the website or just on the phone?
Okay, so
website?
I'm mostly, I got burned out on this stuff, so I'm kind of like in semi-retirement, you might say.
Yeah.
I've offered to make this information available through TAD because he's expressed an interest in distribution of it, and that's fine with me. I put in a little time here on the phone on Saturdays, and he's putting together a webinar thing. So,
I couldn't see that. I couldn't see you on the website, on the Toxic website. But anyway, talking about distribution, well, I could probably help you with distribution because I do, and Tad contacted me because I do 3 television shows. I'm also a paralegal, and if I enjoy what you're saying is be spot on. I'd like to get you some exposure on TV too.
Well, I think you need to handle that through TAD.
Yeah, I can do that. But I just want to thank you very much for what you're offering. It's spot on. So hopefully we have a lot of listeners here, and they're taking notes because you're doing fine. And also, the case out of California just happened on Thursday where a guy was driving his own truck down the road, and essentially they flagged him down, and he pulled into his friend's private driveway. He was just almost there. He pulled into that private drive. Anyway, and he got out of his car and said he asked to establish jurisdiction and saying that, anyway, the cops, long story short, the cops got him down on the ground, 69 years old, and handcuffed him horribly and did things, and he was just really upset about the whole thing. But and then they impounded his truck and everything else, and and he asked for probable cause. What was the reason for? And they couldn't answer for any probable cause for the stop. And the only charge they have against him is just resisting an officer. And so that just happened Thursday, and so he's contacted me now, and I'm going to try to get him some help.
Well,
yeah.
I've had my own personal Rodney King incident. Ended up with fractured ribs, a bruised kidney, 5-stitch cut above my eye where they were trying to blind me.
He got injured. He got a broken rib, he thinks.
Yeah. So, like I said, I've taken a few licks, but I don't sit back and watch life go by. I've never been that way. It's like if you're going to live, you got to grab a hold of life with both hands. And sometimes you get a scratch or two out of it, or a bruise. But you learn by it. I look at life as a way as an exercise in building character. I don't know how anybody else looks at it.
Well, right. Got to build something. Might as well be your character. Otherwise, you're not building that. What are you doing?
Yeah. So I've learned the hard way in many ways, and like I said before a couple of weeks ago, I don't use other people for guinea pigs when I'm testing something. I use myself.
Yeah.
And I can make a mistake like anybody else. But the thing I want to stress is that these people wearing uniforms, they're just other people in costumes. In other words, they're no different than you or I. And they've been poorly trained or poorly educated. And if we're going to be as the courts have said, if we're going to be the sovereigns, we have to take responsibility for them as well as ourselves.
Amen.
So I don't go out of my way to belittle a police officer unless they've earned it.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
In other words, the viewpoint is if you want to act like an animal, I'll treat you as one. If you want to act like a rational man, I will treat you as that.
Yeah.
It's up to you, not me.
Absolutely.
So, and I think most people they have a basic desire to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes what they think is the right thing isn't necessarily so. They believe that. So you have to show them, and I say this with tongue in cheek, you have to show them the error of their ways. But do it gently, because you treat them as it kind of goes back to treat them the way you would like them to treat you.
Yeah, the old golden rule, that. But in America, them that's got the gold makes the rules. So,
there is that too.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, if you have Skype, I think we'll get you on a TV show here and get your message out.
Well, like I said, you need to set that up with Tad.
Will do. Yeah. Well, thank you for the good information tonight. Hopefully everybody's paying attention.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, Don.
You're very welcome.
Very fine. God bless.
Okay.
Thanks,
so, hey, Monty.
Yes.
Do you remember Genevieve?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, here she is.
Oh, hi, Genevieve.
Hello, Tad.
Hi there.
And hello, Monty.
Yes.
Well, what an interesting call. I love your description of your life, a full, active, and entertaining life while building character. Boy, that sounds like mine. But it doesn't sound, yours sounds a little more interesting than mine does.
Well, I like people that give as good as they get.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think of people in the gender aspect.
you know, if a man's got a backbone, he's got a pair of testicles, and if a woman's got a backbone, she's got chesticles. Either way, they got backbone.
One can hope.
Okay.
Okay, so I have, in keeping with the conversation tonight, I have some questions regarding car and driver license.
Genevieve, what'd you do now?
No, hey, look it. I'm a very cautious person. I haven't driven in a couple of years because I'm that cautious. Unfortunately, my life is such that I've been able to get away with it, and it hasn't been too onerous. But I'm getting tired of it. I want to be able to get in my car and drive, you know. So,
drive or travel?
Oh, okay, stickler.
You can do either one. You just have to have a license for the second one. You can issue your own license.
Well, that's a question that I have for you. You say that you don't have a license.
I do have a license, but I issued.
You have issued.
Yes.
Yeah. So what kind of information do you have on your license that you have issued yourself?
Well, mine doesn't have a picture on it because that's personal information. That would be indecent exposure to show that. So, but what it does have, way back when I was in my youth, you have to understand, I was operating 18-wheelers before I was old enough to have a learner's permit. And back then, when you got a license, there was no picture on it. It was just a piece of paper that had your name and your date of your birth and a number, and that was about it.
And easily counterfeitable.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I did it, my license that I created for under my own authority as a sovereign is basically it just says let's see, I think it says notice at the top. I'd have to look again. I haven't pulled it out for so long. I don't even know what. But anyway, it says I hereby give myself permission to engage in commerce on the highways, on the public highways. And then I just signed it and put my date of birth on there. And the date of birth, as I said, has no dashes or slashes. It's just a string of numbers. And that is the number of the license. I had a postal inspector. They're kind of equivalent to a U.S. Marshal. Get my face on that once. And he asked me about that. He says, don't you have any state-issued ID? I said, no. And then of course, I also had my personal ID, which is in Volume 2, with the notary seal.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And, I mean, I've cashed postal money orders. I've done a lot of things with that ID, and they don't even question it.
And when, so on this ID that you have, on this that is driver license that you've self-issued,
right?
Do you at the top of the page say driver license?
Well, you could if you want to. I just wouldn't use all caps. I'd use title case.
Okay. And then do you have your autograph on it?
No, I have my signature. I'm authorizing myself to use the highways for commerce.
Okay. And then...
And he said, well, this postal inspector, he says, well, I don't think you can do that. And I said, are you challenging my authority? And the body language was very clear. He backed off a couple of steps, put his hands up in the air, and he says, no, I am not challenging your authority.
How very satisfying that must have been.
Yeah, I mean, he knew.
Now, if you were to sign it, would you then sign it on the right side or the left side?
Wherever's comfortable for you. You can use up the whole bottom of the card if you want. Get some card stock and make it the same size as a business card and print it on there and sign it and put your birth date on it.
Ah.
That is the license number.
That's very interesting. And I've also noted on a couple of your other documents that you use a dotted line.
Yes.
And what is the purpose of that? Or the significance of it?
I'm trying to figure out how to reduce that. I did a write-up on that, and I have not yet given that. I figured that'd come up in the webinars or whatever. There's a lot of stuff I've done subsequent to the handbooks. They're on my computer. I just haven't gotten them to Tad yet. I don't want to overwhelm him right now. He's got his hands full.
Get with it, Tad.
The dotted line, you've heard the expression sign on the dotted line?
Yeah.
Okay. The solid line indicates a bar or a solid stop.
Uh-huh.
And when you sign on the dotted line, it has a different legal significance. But I'm avoiding getting into that because it's somewhat of a lengthy topic.
That will be a topic for one of our webinars for our members when we get that built in.
Could be. It's let's see, what else can I say about it?
Well, can you tell me where I can find this information out? I haven't got a clue where all these use this color ink and use this kind of a line and sign on the right-hand side or the left. Where do you find this information?
You find it in the member section of youhavetheright.com and our webinars.
Well, as far as the original information, you'd have to make a study of admiralty law.
Oh.
Or admiralty jurisdiction, I'm sorry. It's maritime law administered under admiralty jurisdiction. And that gets into commerce, it gets into insurance. Insurance is all admiralty, you know.
I understand that. And speaking of insurance, do you have insurance? Or do you use a bond? Or what do you do?
Yeah.
My word is my bond.
Well, that's a bunch of crap.
Well, here's the thing.
You just wait a minute. You just smashed into my car. What do you mean your word is your bond? Now you gotta pay for the damage you caused. How are you gonna do that?
Send me a bill.
Yeah, you just send me a bunch of dollar signs.
Well, what happens between individuals is different than what happens between quote-unquote government and individuals. By the way, most of your insurance policies don't guarantee they'll pay. They accept the liability, but they don't say they'll pay. A lot of times you have to sue them to get them to pay.
Well, my concern is I have an unblemished record, and I expect it to continue.
Okay.
I don't like the idea that that I need to buy insurance, which I understand is reinsurance, and I've heard that you can, once you've opened up a treasury account, you can issue a bond that would basically cover your ass if you were to get in an accident.
Let me put this in a different context so you understand what I mean by my word is my bond.
Okay.
When you do a mortgage contract on a house, what do they usually want with that to secure it?
Collateral or something. I don't know.
What they want is a promissory note.
Okay.
And that's where you promise to pay. And that's all it is a promise. That's your bond. Your word is your bond. And that's what creates the credit for the mortgage. Now, does it make sense?
Not in terms of car insurance or house insurance.
If I give you a promissory note, that is a valid tender. Did you know that?
And then let's say you run into my car,
Mm-hmm.
and you give me a promissory note for all of the expenses of repairing my car.
Right.
What do I do with that promissory note?
You can take it to the person that's going to repair your car.
Mhm.
Do what they want to do with it. It's a negotiable instrument.
Well, then what do they do with it?
Yeah.
That's up to them.
Okay, let's say they actually want some Federal Reserve notes. What do they do then?
Well, it depends on which viewpoint are you taking on this. Are you the one doing the repairs and you want to know how you can collect on this promissory note?
Yes.
Then what would be the first step?
Well, I would think of going to a bank.
Okay. Now tell me, how, in terms of what we just discussed, a promissory note is a bond, and it is valid tender. What do you think Federal Reserve notes are?
Well, we know that they're just promises to pay.
Right. So does the Federal Reserve have more authority than you or more right than you to issue a promissory note?
Not really.
Oh. So if they want Federal Reserve notes to pay for the repairs on your cars, then you can say, well, then take the promissory note to the Federal Reserve.
And how would you do that? Mail it to the Fed window or something?
Huh?
Take it to the Fed window in Washington?
No, there's regional offices. I think there's one in Tacoma or Spokane, Washington. I think there's another in
One in Portland.
San Francisco. Yeah, there might be one in Portland, too.
There is. All the Brinks trucks go there every day.
Sure. You just take it there and present it.
And the Federal Reserve in Portland, for example, will actually hand over Federal Reserve notes for a promissory note that I've written to them, to the poor car repair person.
Yeah, right.
No, you only do that if that's what he wants. If he wants Federal Reserve notes, if that'll satisfy the promise, then that's where he has to go to get them.
Well, what if he would prefer silver?
Well, then he'll have to take that up with the Treasury.
So could I write a promissory note to someone who repaired the car of someone I've hit, and that repair person would be able to take that promissory note to the Treasury and get still? I mean, how does somebody get paid? Because I don't want to leave anybody hanging.
Yeah, how would they get the value so that they can?
But I love these academic arguments. You know, one of my mentors told me. Actually, he did this in court. He was cited for no insurance. This was in Oregon, and what he told the court was, court wanted him to get insurance, and they would dismiss the charge. He says, I can't do that. And they said, why not? And he said, because according to the statistics put out by the Department of Insurance for Oregon, 99% of the accidents that occur in Oregon are caused by insured drivers, and I don't want to be one of them because I don't want to have an accident.
Oh my God.
So, okay, Monty, if let's say I run into your car.
Yeah, Monty.
And
why would you do that? Why would you run into my car?
well,
To prove a point.
by accident.
By
course,
accident.
unless you
All right.
pissed me off.
Yeah, but you're presuming that I'm going to let you do that. You know how many accidents? You know how many potential accidents I have prevented?
Oh, well.
I have a feeling you won't prevent this one, so academically, let's move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, you slipped, and I hit your car with my car. And you need to get some repairs done on it. How do I make you whole again?
Then we negotiate. I say, what can you afford?
No, you wouldn't say that. You would say,
Of course I would.
want my car restored to its previous condition. Right?
Right. Right.
Okay. And I could pay you $5 a month. How's that? 5 Federal Reserve notes a month.
Okay, that's fine.
But you wouldn't say that, because then if you don't have enough Federal Reserve notes to get your car repaired, and you're relying on my measly $5 a month, you're not going to have a car that you're able to operate, right?
Right. Now, you're mixing moral with legal.
Well,
you want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
That's moral. On the legal side, you run into somebody and they want their car repaired, and you're uninsured. Within the meaning of the code. Then you, God, I'm blanking on this. Signs of old age.
I'm right behind you.
Oh, sure, blame it on old age.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, give us a break, Tad, young'un.
Okay, now, you run into me, and you're uninsured.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, not the moral side, legally, you know how you get around that? This has already been decided in the courts, by the way.
I don't know how to get around it in any way.
Yeah, there is a way. It's I've seen it in insurance cases. You just say I sneezed. That's what caused the accident. Sneezing is considered an act of God, force majeure.
No.
That's correct.
No.
And I've seen insurance companies get out from paying on that basis. The guy sneezed, he lost control of the car, and they had no control over it. Force majeure, act of God, nobody's liable.
Wow.
Now that's the legal side.
Okay.
It is not the moral side. The moral side is you're going to have to take it up with your Creator.
Well,
get down on your knees and you say, Pappy, I could use a little help here.
I don't know if that would help the person whose car I rammed into.
Well, again, it's negotiation. You know, you have to work it out. You have to work it out to what you can both agree to.
So,
if they want to sue you, now they've made the matter legal instead of moral.
Well, they wouldn't get anything. I don't have anything they can sue me for. See, that's the thing. That I don't have anything that they could take from me. So it wouldn't help them. And that's why, even though I really dislike the idea of being a slave to car insurance, if it is helpful in case I do damage someone else or their property, then then I'm willing to do that. But if there's another way, a promissory note or a bond or something like that, like, isn't there an insurance bond that you can get through your state government or something like that?
Yeah, they call it self-insurance. You have to look it up. It's been a while since I've looked at it. But I think every state has what they call a self-insurance program.
Which requires that you put up something of value.
Yeah. Probably, I would say.
Like if you have $1 million liability, you got to have something that's worth $1 million of value, like $1 million of silver or money market or something.
Now, I know that another alternative, and I don't think that applies here, but it might apply to some. I know of one very, very successful chiropractor in Southern California. Got a lot of money, had his own clinic and so on. He was spending so much money on malpractice insurance that he decided to stop doing that, and he started his own insurance company, and he put what it would normally be his premiums, or put his money would normally go to an insurance company into his own insurance company. And it piled up so quickly that he used to, in order to avoid the taxes on it, he used to take vacations to Hawaii and Asia and whatever else, just to burn up the excess. That's how much money these insurance companies are making.
Well, not only that, but they're making money on the application with your Social Security number on it.
Well, that too. But the point is, people just cannot visualize how much money these corporations are making.
That's why we need to get back to working as a community of individuals and families. We keep that money and that energy within our community.
Yeah. Or if you don't want to take the chance on running into somebody's car, you could always go join an Amish community.
No, I think I'll stay in Oregon right where I'm at.
All right, so hang on a second. I want to get back to a promissory note, presenting it to a Federal Reserve Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because so far what I've heard, that sounds like the most reasonable.
Well,
so
if they reject it, you can say on what ground?
Yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to pay it. Get out.
That's interesting. That's I think there's laws on the books in this system about unfair trade and monopolies.
Well, we have a monopoly. What are you going to do about it? Get out.
Well, you have to remember that there's still certain things they don't dare step over the line on.
So are you saying, Monty, that if I wrote a promissory note and gave it to you, for example, and you took it to the Federal Reserve, you would be able to actually collect on it?
No, I didn't say I'd be able to collect on it, not directly. I might have to sue them, but I would eventually collect on it. And I'm not getting into all of this stuff about the Social Security account and the on and on and on. I mean, I'm not even getting into that. I'm talking pure commerce. I'm talking about negotiable instruments law. I'm talking about UCC.
Okay, well, I guess I'll move on to another topic unless Tad has another question regarding this.
Well, it sounded good until you said you had to sue them.
Well, you might have to. There's no guarantees in any of this, Tab.
Well, I guess that was my next question is this how you do it, or is this theory?
Well, to reinforce what I just said, there's no guarantees in any of this. It's because you're dealing with individuals.
Right.
Okay? Now, sure, they might be working for an agency or a company or a corporation, whatever, but you're still dealing with an individual. And it makes differences. Kind of like the story I was told originally. This was a true story, but I don't know. It sounds like a joke. Some guy was going down the highway doing about 60, and a patrol car comes up behind him and just follows him, and he steps it up to 70, and the patrol car matches his speed and stays behind him, and he steps it up to 80, and patrol car stays with him, and he goes up to 90, and pretty soon he's up to 120, and finally the lights come on, and the patrol car pulls him over, and this state policeman comes up, and he said, can you explain to me why you were doing 120? He says, yeah. He said, my wife ran off with a cop, and I thought you were trying to bring her back. And the cop thought that was so funny. He said, I'm going to let you go. That was good. And that's where the individual differences make a difference.
Yeah, it
Okay.
really does. I've been stopped a few times, and the cops have been very nice to me, and no warning, no nothing, just, okay, have a nice night.
Yeah.
Of course, that was when I had a license plate and a driver license, so.
Well, remember this. The license plate itself indicates that vehicle belongs to the state. They have the authority to stop it.
So
You can't get license plates unless you give the state the title on the property.
So did you send your driver license and license plates back to the DMV or the Director of Transportation?
No, but I know people who have. They got their title back. It had Boyd stamped all over it, but they got their title back.
Was this 20 years ago or recently?
Probably 20 years ago. I don't know what they're doing now. But remember, like I said, this whole business of license plates and registration of school children, and registration of your vehicles, and registration to vote, it's all fraudulent transfer of titles, to which the state's a party. That's what they don't want to bring out. That's why the licenses are required, because what they're doing is unlawful.
So excuse me.
So what if you have, say, a license? If you take your plate and you send it back and they give you your title, you put in for plates private and then title number, blah, 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 on it.
Well, there's a couple of different ways. Oregon, I don't know if they've changed this, because every time we've done something like this, they change their statutes. But what we did one time in Oregon, they had a thing called a non-registered registration. Sounds like, no, I'm serious. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it was a non-registered registration. And they issue a number like a license plate number, but it has an N on the front. So it's an N and then numerical characters. So we had a guy do that with his pickup and put in for a non-registered registration. They sent him back the certificate with the N number on it. So he painted that number on his bumper. And the way the vehicle code statutes read is you don't have to have insurance on a non-registered registered car. And there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. And we caused him some real severe problems with that. But I don't know if they're still doing that or not. Again, I mean, you have to research your statutes for your state. They're not that difficult. They're pretty well indexed now. And especially when they're online, because you got search engines that can speed it up.
Well, a couple of years ago, I sent a notice to the Director of Transportation telling him what I believe to be true and asking him to correct me if I was wrong.
Right.
And he, pardon me?
Go ahead.
And he didn't. He didn't write back, of course. And I sent a couple of more letters basically saying the same thing. And when he didn't respond, I finished up with a notice of irrevocable estoppel by acquiescence, saying, well, since you haven't said anything to me, then the statements that I made to you in my previous letters stand as my truth, and therefore I am going to get out on the road and be in my own car and without registering with you, and that I wish to be left alone, and that anybody who tangles with me will be subject to these fees for interacting.
Yeah, and then that took some time and several letters and so on and so forth. It's far simpler to just do the notice of schedule of fees and charges and serve it on all the appropriate agency heads.
Right, and that's what you were talking about last week. So
you don't have to get into all this other stuff because what you're talking about is UCC.
Right. So what I want to do is what you were talking about last week, which is that schedule of fees.
Right.
And then be done with it. But do I need to return their license plates and the expired driver license?
Yeah, I would. Well, if it's expired, that you want to make a photocopy of that because that is proof that the contract has expired.
Okay.
Okay.
And I do have a copy of it.
Right. So you want to be able to prove that there was a contract, but the contract has expired.
Okay.
It's no longer enforceable. Now, as far as the plates, yeah, you can return the plates, get your title back, but you're going to have to put something on that rig.
Well, I also have some private plates that I had made, but I also have another one. Another set of plates. I'm so cautious. I'm 2 years, and because I don't want trouble. But
you do something that they recognize.
Well,
what you want is a plate that tells a traffic policeman this property does not belong to the state.
Well, the one that I actually ordered for myself, the set of plates. Basically, let's see, I've got it right here.
Well, I can say private property. It can say not required. It can say a great many things.
Yeah, well, I say private, non-commercial, that kind of stuff on it, and with a number that I made up. And I think that's pretty basically it.
Well, I don't even put it. If you're going to use that kind of a plate, a private plate, you don't need a number.
Well, I thought they might want a number just because. Okay, I say non-commercial, peaceful traveler, the number, no expiry, private property, and not for hire. How much more direct can I be?
Well, you can be more direct and a hell of a lot more simple and just say not required.
Not required.
Or, yeah, I know a guy did that in the state of Washington. He had a plate that says not required.
Oh, that is it.
So he had one of these vintage Cadillacs with the big pins on the back and all of that in beautiful condition. And it was a real collector car, and he just had plates on it that said not required. He'd have cops follow him, but they'd never pull him over.
Oh. Interesting.
And, or, like I said, you just put private property. That tells the police officer that the state has no interest in that property.
I also have the other set of plates I have basically are have been copyrighted by somebody, and they just basically say a number, Sojourner. Oh, I can't remember the exact wording. Something, a Society of Sojourner or Sojourner Society, and a number. And it's
if you just want to have police officers leave you alone. Even with state plates, if you want them to leave you alone, I'll tell you the best way to do that, and that's firsthand from cop. I've known a number of cops personally, and are good friends with a lot of them. And one thing they do not want to deal with, they will studiously avoid dealing with it, is if you paint up your car with graffiti, it says Jesus saves, and on and on and on. They don't want to deal with religious fanatics.
A roadside sermon. Oh, that's ingenious.
Okay.
I love it.
I mean, you can be as creative as you want to be with this thing.
Oh, I'm not very creative because there's so much information out there, and trying to get it all in my head, it's very hard. Regarding the original manufacturer's certificate or statement of origin, do we need to have that in our possession?
Oh no, you don't want that.
No, that's what they're going to return to you if you return the plates.
Oh, they will automatically, or do I need to request it or command it as a sovereign might?
Well, you just send them a nice letter and say, I'd like to have my title back. That is the title. It's not that certificate they issue. That's simply a certificate that the title exists, but they don't specify who has it. So what you want is the title, which is the certificate of origin, returned to you, and here are your plates. I no longer require them.
And then when you get that MSO, put it in a safe.
Well, you want to make a photocopy of it to carry in your glove box in case you're questioned about it. And then if they want to tow the car, you say you move that car 1 inch, and I'll charge you with grand theft auto, and I will make it stick.
If I buy a car from a private party, like a friend, and get a bill of sale from him, does that eliminate the state from the picture if I don't send in their, certificate of title?
No, what it does is it establishes that you have an equitable interest in the title. There's only one title on property, and it's the origin, certificate of origin.
Okay.
So when you create a bill of sale, what they're selling you is an interest in that title.
Okay.
Now, if you're holding the title itself, the certificate of origin, if you're holding the title itself, there's nothing to insure. You don't need insurance.
Would you mind repeating
that? If you're holding the title,
the actual MCO?
Yeah. If you're actually in possession of it, there's nothing for an insurance company to insure. It's kind of like title insurance on land or property.
Yeah.
I've gone to them and I said, I've got the land patent on this property. What's the title insurance going to cost? And they came right back and said, there's nothing to insure if you're holding the title. We can't.
Whoa.
We can't insure a chain of title if you're holding the title.
What? Wow.
So now that's how you get around the insurance requirement for your car. Just have the original title.
Yeah.
But the state can't require me to have insurance, can they, if I'm just driving privately?
That goes back to what I was discussing last week. Insurance is part of the political code.
Right.
The state has no authority to compel you to make a political choice. Where's the enabling authority to do that?
Right.
That empowers them to do that. Where the motor vehicle code is political code. Where is the enabling authority that empowers the state of Oregon or California or Washington or anybody else, or their instrumentalities? That's a phrase you want to get real comfortable with. Or their instrumentalities, which includes the corporate state, to compel you, and the compel is the other operative word. Where do they get the enabling authority, or what is the enabling authority which empowers them to compel you to make a political choice?
I love that question.
That's the importance of that table of titles that we talked about last week. It categorically classifies all the statutes that are political, and the courts have no jurisdiction to determine political controversies.
Love it.
That's done through the ballot box, not the courts.
In your first volume, Monty, you talk about when the driver license expires, with a clean bill of health, you suggest that we have the county clerk or the recorder make a certified true copy of it and then put the original certified copy in a safe place.
Right.
And then we need to return the expired driver license to the DMV state office that handles licensing.
Right.
And enclose a notice of prejudice with it.
Right.
Do you still think that's the way to go?
You can still do that if you want.
Well, I don't want to do any more than I have to.
Oh, you're being lazy.
No, I'm not.
It's much more entertaining and educational the hard way.
I want the easy way.
Oh, okay.
I'm tired of being entertained and educated by this. I want it over with. I think you get that.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Essentially, procedurally, I don't think there would be much difference. But remember this: when you're working with paperwork on this kind of stuff, everything operates today under the UCC, even though it has never been enacted as law. Everything operates under the UCC, and under the UCC, and this is where the courts create all their presumptions and how they do things. An unrebutted affidavit stands as truth. So if you create a document in the form of an affidavit, are you following me?
Yes, I think I am.
Okay. You can title it something else, but you can also put in the body of it that it is notice in the form of an affidavit, and you do it in such a way that they don't dare rebut it or challenge it, and it'll stand as truth in any court in the state or in the country, because they're all operating under the UCC.
Great. Now, regarding recording at the county clerk's office, we have the county that we live in. Let's see, where is that? I have this question already lined up, and it has to do with our county recorder doesn't have a miscellaneous file and doesn't have what's the other one that it doesn't have, sweetheart? There are two files that it doesn't have that, gosh, I have this question. Where the heck is it?
What is it you want to record?
Well, okay, so let's say I send in a notice, send an affidavit to somebody. And I'd like to record it as a county recorder. But they don't have a miscellaneous file. Oh, here it is. And they don't have a notice file.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So where do they record their legal notices?
They have notice of filing, power of attorney, revocation, and security agreement.
Okay, go to the newspaper of record in that county
Okay.
and ask their notary, where do you record, how do you record your affidavits of publication?
After publication?
No, whenever you publish a legal notice, they have to give you an affidavit of publication.
Okay. Okay. Got
All right? You go to them and you say, okay, if you or I want to record this affidavit of publication, how do you do that? What file do they put it in?
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. That's
Okay.
really helped me a lot.
Okay.
Because I've been over a barrel about that. What do I do? Where do I put it?
Well, it kind of goes back to, I mean, for me it's easy because it's, it just makes sense to do it that way because it's kind of like, you know, does a bear shit in the woods or does he use an outhouse?
Are you a country boy?
You could say that.
Yeah.
All right, hey, you guys, we've been going on now for an hour and 41 minutes.
Oh, Tad, you must be.
Oh, yes.
You must have cauliflower ear by now.
Cauliflower ears.
Oh, that's right.
I have a headset.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Monty, and thank you, Tad, for your perseverance.
Oh, perseverance. Thank you for your persistent questions.
I got a million of them.
That's
Okay.
cool. So chime in next week for the Monty and Genevieve show.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you. I really, really, really appreciate it. This has given me a lot of grist for the mill and finally some comprehension of what the heck is going on.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. I look forward to next week.
All right. You're welcome.
Okay.
All right, everybody.
Good
We're going
night.
to call it an evening, and the documents Monty talked about again is in the member section of youhavetheright.com. Check it out. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.